exactly is guard retention? How do we make the most use of it? So Paul stands up, all right. Okay, so my guard, pretty much, is having my feet, okay, in front of my opponent. In Jiu-Jitsu, your guard is pretty much refers to the ability to use your feet on your opponent to hook, to sweep, to do, different attacks with our feet, all right? And so just as it is with attacking, guard retention is also mainly done with our feet. Now, there's a few ways that you can think about guard retention. You have a specific approach and you have a general approach. With the general approach, it's a series of principles that we try to maintain at all times to stop ourselves getting into bad situations where someone gets almost passed or something like that. And then you also have a specific approach where you use certain retention techniques against specific passes. It's something that you should know as well, but in general, you want to proactively deal with the passes via having good knowledge of these principles and trying to apply them at all times. So what exactly are these principles? So Paul is standing, all right. I'm in a supine position, okay, that's where guard retention comes into play. Seated, we're looking for grips, we're looking to set things up, but if we're on our back and our opponent is passing us, okay, let's say maybe we're in a guard, okay, our opponent disconnects from us and he starts passing, this is where guard retention comes into play. So let's discuss what we actually need to make sure that, what are the general principles of guard retention? First, we want to protect at all times this elbow-knee space, this space right here. If Paul gets into this space, okay, he passes us, that's the pass, okay? This is literally called the pass box. If someone gets in that space, they have a pass, they get points, they're in a good position. So that's something that we're trying to defend at all times. The way that we do that, simply put, is making sure that our elbow and our knee are connected. So if Paul does the same thing, okay, well, now I have frames here. I literally have a wall to push him away. He can't enter the pass box to pass me, okay? So all pass techniques are about opening that space and getting inside. So we want to deny that. So first, we keep our knees as high in our armpits as possible, and we connect our elbows to our knees. Second, we want to make sure that the bottoms of our feet are facing our opponent's torso at all times. We want to pretend we have laser beams in our feet and they're facing our opponent's torso. So, for example, let's say my laser beams are not facing his torso. He just comes in and he has to deal with two less frames. Now it's harder for me to get grips on him versus if I'm up like this and he comes in, I can at least use my feet. He's coming into frames. I'm one step ahead, okay? And it's a lot easier to defend passing attacks, okay, when we're facing him. So in all situations, if he starts moving around me, I want to make sure I'm tracking, okay? I have my laser beams pointing at his torso, okay? It's a key component of guard retention. So anytime he comes in, okay, I have frames straight away versus if he comes in and I'm facing down, he can just tour under me, just like that, exactly. So we always want to make sure, okay, that our feet are facing him. This makes it way easier to connect to a guard later on. Third thing, we want to make sure that our head, okay, is always in between our knees. A lot of passing techniques rely on getting our knees away from our head. This is a twisted position for us. It's very difficult to be strong here. The pass box is open. Our spine is completely twisted. Okay, so we're always trying to make sure that our head is in between our knees. Okay, so to recap that, we have our knees in our armpits as high as we can, our elbows around our knees, our feet pointing at him. So now whenever he comes in, I'm ready to connect with what have you, and it makes it much more difficult for him to pass. Versus if I'm just out here like this, it's very, very easy for him to get into a good position. So that's what we want to do. And now, when it comes to frames, what we do with our hands, there's a few different things that we can do with our hands. These are really important as well. So first off, let's say that we have our posture, okay, elbows and knees connected, knees in my armpits, feet facing him. Let's say he does start coming around. Here, I can use one arm, okay, and I can either grab his shin to recenter myself, or if it's coming quite low, I can use, okay, an arm on his shoulder to stop him from putting pressure on us, all right? So my arms are very important here as well. I can even use both, okay? There's certain situations where that's called for. However, I typically prefer to use one so that I can use what's called an elbow frame on my knee. So I have my elbow at 90 degrees to my knee. So let's say he does start putting pressure on my legs, okay? I can actually reinforce my knee, okay, with my elbow. I'm not using muscle here, it's just the structure of my bones. This is a critical component to maintaining the elbow-knee connection versus I'm out here, he pushes it down to the ground, and it's much harder to defend. So the posture that we like to assume, okay, let's just do a little drill that I want you guys to practice. You should be, okay, laser beams facing our opponent, knees to our armpits as high as we can, elbows connected to our knees, and then let's track our opponent. He starts walking around, okay, and I use my elbows on the floor to move myself around, maintaining this posture. Now let's say he actually starts passing and starts moving around, okay, I have one hand to grab his knee, his shin, and recenter myself, okay, so that's the second thing you can do. So he comes around the other way, start recentering myself. Recenter, and then ideally you'd connect to a guard, okay, in whatever fashion you want. Now, and now let's look at how we can use the elbow frame. So same thing, but he starts putting a bit more pressure, okay? I keep this elbow frame and I can use one hand to recenter, okay, he passes the other way, he puts pressure, I have the elbow frame and I can recenter, okay? So that's something that we should always be thinking about. Without the elbow frame, when he puts pressure, we lose that principle of keeping our head in between our knees, and now we're vulnerable, all right? So just to recap that's general principles of guard retention. So we want to make sure that our knees are inside our armpits, as high as we can to our armpits. Our feet are pointing at him, all right? So our feet are pointing at him, so he comes into frames straight away. We have our head in between our knees, okay? Our elbows are on our knees. Sometimes we can frame. And depending on the situation and how he's passing, we can start to use our elbow frame to maintain this structural integrity that we want. Furthermore, when we think about guard retention, we want to think about our guard as like a fort or a castle, if you will. And each of our arms and legs are towers and gates. Okay, let's say towers, to be more specific, are towers in our walls. And each time when one of our towers is not in play, it's much easier for him to pass. Our towers are our frames, so our feet and our hands, okay? Our elbows, these are all our frames that we use. So if we're in this type of posture and we have our feet down, okay, we have half a castle, versus here, we're ready, okay? Our whole castle is in play. We're much more prepared to defend and attack. So that's the way we should think about it. Our frames are our defenses, okay? We have our fort, and once he starts breaking down our fort, okay, moving my knee away from my elbow, exposing the pass box, okay, my gates are open, he can start passing. So it's a good little way to think about it, and a useful analogy. Passing is pretty much always about opening the elbow-knee space. If we keep that closed, that's the best way that we're going to prevent a pass. It's that simple, okay? You keep it closed, he can't pass. And then we do all these extra things to make sure that no matter what he does, we're able to maintain the structural integrity that we spoke about of this ideal retention position. So that's the general approach. This is something that you should be doing, the whole time when you're playing guard. You're not extending for no reason. There are situations when you come out to connect, but you're looking to stay tight the whole time, okay? You're not extending randomly, you're letting him come to you, and then you're setting up your grips from there, okay? And we'll go later into how we actually set up from a seated position, but this is the general theory of guard retention.